Now I think it's completely fair to say that the 8th generation was probably the worst video game generation to launch. Well, it got there in the end, and here's my top 10 PlayStation 4 games. Okay, so before I move on to my top 10 PlayStation 4 games, I'm going to justify what I said at the beginning, and that being the 8th generation was the worst launch of any video game generation in history. Now I know a lot of people are banging the drum about this 9th generation being quite poor, but I want you to cast your mind back to the 8th generation race. You see, there was 3 competitors. You had Nintendo, you had Microsoft, and you had Sony. Now Nintendo, they didn't even care about starters orders, they just jumped the gun straight away with the Wii U, which, well, totally passed by everyone. No one really recognised the fact that the machine was there, and to this day, not many people do recognise the machine is still there. They of course brought in a substitute in the form of the Nintendo Switch, a great machine, but unfortunately just a bit too late and just a bit too underpowered. You see, that machine is more like a 7.5 generation than a true 8th generation machine, and that's why, well, it was never going to win and didn't get off to a good start because it was far too late. Then you had, of course, Microsoft with the Xbox One, and well, they kind of tripped as they started their race, didn't they? They were spending so much time trying to change and rechange whatever running shoes they were wearing because they made so many poor decisions, they didn't even get off the starting line. So that left Sony with the PlayStation 4, and what did they do? Well, they just had to have a gentle stroll over that line, and that's what they did for the next couple of years. Let's face it, Knack, Killzone, are we talking about console selling games there? Well, not quite, but that's the facts of what it was. Now, of course, as I said, the generation did build momentum, and towards the end we had some fantastic games. So let's take a look at my PlayStation 4 top games from Generation 8. So coming in at number 10, I'm going to present the game Until Dawn. Now, Until Dawn is not a spectacular game, it's not a big AAA budget game, but what it is a game that does everything right, or at least it does everything right for me. Now, being an older gamer, I can harken back to the days of point and click adventures, games that I still love to this day, and this here is the modern evolution of a point and click adventure. You have mostly static screens. Yes, you can move about within environments, but at the start of it, it's a static screen where you investigate what's in the scene and you interact appropriate with those objects. Now, of course, it's also a horror game, and it's one of the best horror games I've played in a long time because it truly does make you feel afraid. And the reason it makes you afraid is you're not some sort of superpowered soldier or a member of some SWAT team. No, you're just a regular teenager out there in this cabin in the woods, or in the mountains in this case, and you're being hunted down by a vicious monster. And for me, that's what makes a true horror game. Not that I'm taking it away from any of the games such as Resident Evil and the like, but this here really keeps you on the edge of your seat, and I heartily recommend it, and it's in at my number 10. Coming in at number 9, we have Uncharted 4. Now, I do love the Uncharted series. I think most people who have played them love them. And Uncharted 2 is probably definitely in my top 10 games of all time. And the reason that I've chosen this game for number 9 to be on such a prestigious list is quite simply because it was one of the first games that drew me into buying a PlayStation 4. I didn't get one at launch, as I said at the beginning. It was a slow burn to that particular generation, well, for me anyway, and there was nothing much that I wanted to buy for it. But when games like this started coming out, well, I had no option to get out there. Now, it wasn't the game that made me buy a PlayStation 4, but it certainly had a hand in it, and that's mainly due to the graphical fidelity of this game. It's the first game that I remember actually using the photo mode and spending time with the photo mode, and that is Uncharted 4 at number 9. Coming in at number 8, we have Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I know there's a lot of people out there probably thinking, wait a minute, why is that not at number 1 in your list? Because I'll tell you why. Although this game is wonderful, and this is the game that made me buy a PlayStation 4. It actually made me buy a PlayStation 4 in 2015. Not when it came out, of course, but before it, because the hype train for this game had started to roll along by that time. Now it is only at number 8, and the reasons for that is this: I've played this story before, and yes, it's different, they have made some tweaks and changes, but as far as I'm concerned, as wonderful as this game is, and it truly is wonderful, and I'm so looking forward to seeing the other parts when they come out, that is. Final Fantasy VII, the original game, well, it's a much stronger game at the moment in my particular head, so that's why this game, although it's still in a good position, it's still only number 8 on my top 10 PlayStation 4 games. Coming in at number 7, I'm going to give you Mafia 3. Now this might surprise a few people because I have said time and time again to people who know me at least anyway, that the Grand Theft Auto games are something that I'm not interested in. In Mafia 3, is it basically a Grand Theft Auto clone? Well, to me, no, there's much more story driven, because you take, of course, control of your protagonist here, and I'm not going to spoil anything of the story, but he's coming back from the Vietnam War in the late 60s, and he wants to give up the life of crime that he left before he joined the army and was obviously recruited to go to Vietnam. Now, for me, this is what hooked me in. We had a redemption story here. And yes, the gameplay is similar to Grand Theft Auto, but it's the story and the heart of the story. And not only that, something else that bumps this right up the list for me is the soundtrack. It's all soundtrack from the 60s, it's wonderful classic rock, right up my street. And you know what, if that's your kind of thing, definitely play this game, even just to drive about and listen to the radio. Fantastic game, and that's why it's so high in my list. Coming in at number 6, Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands. And again, this will surprise a few people as well, because you know, or they know, that I don't play first person shooters. Well, the beautiful thing about this game is you don't have to play it in first person. You can play it in first person all the way through, you can play it in third person all the way through, or you can even switch. There's a wonderful mechanic in this game that you can play in third person while you're on the move, and the second that you pull the aim button, it goes straight into a first person view of either your iron sights or your sniper scope, depending on what weapon you have. And that was absolutely fantastic for me. Not only that, it's got one of the mechanics that I truly love in a game, other than, well, having a good story, something else that I require. Can you play the game stealthily? And well, yes, you can play this game stealthily. So much so that you have a drone that you can fly out, check all your opponents off, and then order your team to go kill them. Great game if you love first person shooters, if you love open world adventures, if you love video games. This is definitely one that you should have in your collection, and it's definitely one that's worthy of a place in anyone's top 10 list for the PlayStation 4. Okay, so now we're at the serious end of the list, the top 5, the heavy hitters you might call them, and we'll bring in number 5. And I'm sure some people might think, whoa, this is way too low for a number 5 game, but for me, we have The Witcher 3, The Wild Hunt. Now, The Witcher 3 is probably the best Western RPG that you can play at the moment. The story is huge and massive and intertwined, and even the sub-quests in the game, they all have meaning and purpose. The downloadable content is wonderful as well, and not just a rip-off, but for me it's number 5, and not number 5 because it doesn't deserve to be number 1 in anyone's list. It's just that I've got 4 games down there that maybe had a little bit more of an impact on me, which is saying a lot considering the impact that The Witcher 3 The Wild Hunt had on me. So there we go, number 5, The Witcher 3 The Wild Hunt. Coming in at number 4, we have a game that serves what the purpose of video games are, and that is to transport you out of your mundane life and into another life. And no game on this list, I don't think, transformed me and made me believe that I was somewhere else than this game here. Marvel's Spider-Man on the PlayStation 4. This is a work of art, people. You truly do feel like you're Spider-Man, and it's been said and memed to death, but that's because it's true. If you haven't played Spider-Man on the PlayStation 4 and you have a PlayStation 4 or can get access to a PlayStation 4, This is a must-play game. Now, other games on the list you can play on other consoles. This one has to be PlayStation 4. And I can only say, get it played. Not many games actually make you feel like the character you're playing. They don't immerse you quite as much as this game. And that's why this game is at number 4 and higher than The Witcher. High praise indeed. Number 4, Spider-Man. Now we're into the top 3, and what you're going to find with my top 3 is that these are going to be story heavy, because let's face it, we all have our own reasons for playing video games, and one of the main reasons that I play them is for the story. So coming in at number 3, without a doubt, Horizon Zero Dawn. This game absolutely knocked my socks off. Not just the story, but the huge open world that you get to play in. The wonderful combat mechanics that allow you to play either hack and slash and brutal, or stealthy and sneakily, just the way I like playing the games. And of course, so many stories going on in this particular game. Also, another important factor is of course the graphical fidelity. This game looks stunning. It plays stunning, it has a wonderful story, and it wants you coming back for more time and time again. And you know what? I'm hoping it won't be too much longer before this is knocked down a peg and Horizon Forbidden West comes out to take its place. But until then, number 3, PlayStation 4, Horizon Zero Dawn. Okay, so it's the top 2, the last 2 games on the list, and coming in at number 2, Red Dead Redemption 2. This game is fantastic, it's visually stunning, the story is immense and so involving, there's so many different things to do in it. Again, I'm not going to talk too much about it, there are better places to go and discover this game, and one of them is to turn on your PlayStation 4 and actually just get it played. The combat mechanics are fantastic as well. They improve on Red Dead Redemption, which was a game that I absolutely adore, and if I remember quite rightly, it was on my top 10 PlayStation 3 games. So coming in at number 2 is the fantastic, wonderful, and without a doubt one of the best games ever made, Red Dead Redemption 2. So we're down to the last one, the top game, my number 1 game in the PlayStation 4. My number 1 game in the whole 8th generation, or so far at least, because they're still making games for the 8th generation machines, and you never know, we might have another good one in there. But for me, it was a newcomer for me. It was a game that I'd never played, from a series that I'd never really dabbled in. And at the beginning of this year, I played this game for the first time, and it absolutely knocked my socks off. It has everything that I look for in a game. It has story, it has RPG, it has great sound and music, and it looks stunning. And the game that is number 1 for the PlayStation 4 for the 8th generation for me, at the time of recording, is none other than Persona 5. And I can't sing this game's praises highly enough. It's just simply stunning. Atlus have absolutely knocked it out the park with this one. So much so that I will be going on and trying to play even the older Persona games just to get some history on it, because this game absolutely blew my mind when I played it. Now, it is a 100-hour plus game, and I did put 106 hours into my first playthrough, and it was one of those games, it was one of those rare games that after a 100-hour plus playthrough I wanted to go back and play it through again straight away. That doesn't happen a lot. There's only been a couple of games that I can recall, especially in recent times, that I've wanted to do that, but this was certainly one of them. If you haven't played Persona 5 and you love RPG and JRPG in particular, then you've got to get this played. If you love anime, get it played. If you've never played RPG, never played JRPG, well, this one might be, I don't know, a little bit hard to swallow for a first game, but you never know, it might just be your cup of tea, because it's certainly my number 1, and that is Persona 5 from Atlus on the PlayStation 4 for Generation 8. So there you go, my friends, that was my top 10 games from the PlayStation 4, all games from the 8th generation of video games. Now, of course, if you want to talk about any of these games, then drop that down in the comments. I love nothing more than the interaction between you and me. It's what keeps this channel going, I'll be frankly honest with you. Also, if you've got your own channel, I would love to see your top 10 of Generation 8 games. Now, it doesn't have to be PlayStation 4 games. Go the Xbox One route, go the Switch, or even the Wii U. That would be quite interesting as well, just to see how many top 10 games you could eke out of the Wii U. Just joking, Nintendo fans, don't unsubscribe. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure talking about these games, and until next time, as always, cheerio!